All right. A lot of you have asked for just Jana, and here we go. We're going to get into her. Her video is quite long. I may speed up a few bits and pieces of it, so you'll notice she's speaking faster. That isn't her, that's me playing with the video a little bit. That being said, it will be in its entirety. I don't take things out of context. If you've been with me for any amount of time, you know that. I will not put this video at the end of my video because it's just going to extend it way too long for no reason. So what I'll end up doing is giving you a link, and if you in the description of this video, and if you want to watch it clean all the way through, you have the option to do so. All right, let's get into her and see what she has to say.
Hi friends. In this video, I'm going to share with you the story of my estrangement from my 3 adult daughters. I previously told the story of what happened with my mother and my 2 brothers, and this is the story about what happened with my 3 daughters. My name is Jana, and I'm 67 years old, and I am estranged from my entire family. I said I was going to tell you about what happened to cause this, but I truly don't know what happened, which leaves me with a lot of speculation. My story of what happened with my daughters is a very long one, and in the interest of time, I'm going to try to condense it as much as possible. Please, if you need me to clarify anything, just ask in the comments. It all began back in the year 2015, and at the time, I was living in Ohio, and my 2 oldest daughters were living in Florida, where they are still living. My youngest daughter was also living a few miles away from me in Ohio. Now, I do have a lot of notes, so I hope you don't mind if I occasionally look down. The reason I have notes is because I don't want to leave anything out, and I want to make sure I give the important points so as not to confuse you guys. So earlier that year in 2015, I made the really difficult decision to move from Ohio to Florida. I had just ended a very toxic 12-year relationship, and I also wanted to be closer to my grandchildren, and at that time I had 3 grandchildren.
Okay, so I just want to highlight a couple of things that I'm noticing right away. She's softening her responsibility right out of the gate. First of all, she's the victim. I don't know why. What do you think the odds are that you have 3 daughters, not one, where it's like, a little iffy, okay, maybe 3, and you have 0 clue why they don't want to be in a relationship with you? Anyone? Also, as a therapist who works in this arena very specifically, so I work with a lot of survivors from narcissistic family systems. I work with people like Jana, who are estranged from their family of origin and who are estranged from their offspring. It's rare that I see someone who is estranged from all of their adult offspring. Very rare. Usually 1, sometimes 2, if there's 3 or 4. It's rare though. It's rare that they make it out together. It's rare that they make it out together in relationships with one another. And the reason for that is because usually in these situations, and notice I'm not in absolutes, the dynamic is there's a golden child, there's a scapegoat child. If there's multiple children, there might be non-existent children who kind of coast in between, and there's a hell of a lot of triangulation. And the norm in a very abnormal, unhealthy situation is that the children grow up forming relationships with one another based on the lens of the parent and based on the lens of the parent who is the more abusive parent, which oftentimes is the parent who is more hands-on as well, because that parent is working to control that environment, and so they're really tuned into it. So right out of the gate, I see that. And then I see on the screen here, and I was burnt out from my job. So she wants you to relate to her struggles and create a lens around the fact that maybe her children, adult daughters, didn't have compassion for her. Maybe they weren't supportive of her. And we're only a few minutes into the video. I don't know what she's going to say going along. I've only watched about half of it. I'm just calling your attention to the way that some people, typically covert people, lay groundwork, and it's subtle, and a lot of us won't pick up on it unless you're tuned into that and, you know, understand these dynamics, or if you came from them, right? If you came from them, you can see it. Watch for these things in any relationship that you have. When people are trying to bond with you, for example, over something that harmed them, hurt them, their trauma, however you want to call it, and you don't really know that person well, what they're doing is softening your lens towards them so that you feel a closer connection to them without actually knowing how it is they're going to treat you. So that's a part of the reason these videos are so important. If you're somebody who came from a mother like mine, for example, who was overt in terms of how she was directly with me, and only covert, it wasn't covert really, it was more like nurturing her likability at a different level in public, but there was a huge marked difference. This can look really soft and attractive because we have a wound of, we're looking for someone in a mother figure who is in some way, even when they're not, going to acknowledge that, like, they're at least sad about their offspring not being in a relationship with them. It's a craving that we have. It's a yearning. I never wanted my mother to hurt in terms of me causing her pain. I wanted her to feel pain over how she hurt me. And so when you come from this kind of abuse, you're really vulnerable. I think everybody's vulnerable to a covert. I think those of us who have the wound with a mother and this is what's going on, it's a lot easier for us to attach to them, which is obviously not a safe thing to do. So anyway, anywhoosie, I'm going to try to let this play in big, long chunks for a change. We'll see how I go.
So the plan was that when I got to Florida, I would spend 3 months first with my middle daughter, and then I would move over to my oldest daughter's home, who lived very close, and I would spend the next 3 months with her while I got my feet on the ground. I very much recall a phone call that I had with my middle daughter prior to me moving. And in that phone call, I had asked her if, while I was living in her home, if she would please let me know if that I was doing anything wrong when I was staying with her, or not doing something that she wanted me to do. I stressed that communication was key, and I know her personality type is a little bit particular, and I was trying to prevent any potential problems that could arise from, living with your adult child. When I got to Florida, my plan was
She's already smear campaigning. She's already saying that her daughter is difficult. And she was just trying to be ever so accommodating. So I'm a mother of 3. And like all people, all 3 of my son, 2 daughters, offspring, are all very different people with different temperaments, different ways of communication, different likes, different dislikes. They're all different. And in some ways, they're all the same as well, because they were raised together and all the things. I have to tell you, and I've stayed with both of my daughters for what I consider to be extended periods of time, like her. This is our only relational like her. Well, I guess we both have 3 kids, 3 adults. I have had periods of time where I've lived with my adult daughters because we traveled together. My youngest from the age of, I guess, 20 to 23 lived with me on and off before she moved to Australia. She's now back in Florida. When I visit Florida, I don't stay at a hotel. And I usually stay a month, maybe 2 months when I go. I'll stay with one of my daughters. Now I'll probably flip flop between the two of them because the other one now has her own flat. And I've never once, I have to tell you, had to ask them, what do I need to do? Or what do you need from me? Or because as the person who raised them, I know their temperament, I know what their needs are, I know how to be responsive. And I also know when we're getting on each other's nerves. And we have lots of ways, well, really one way of dealing with that, humor. Like we laugh, we're like, okay, we've had too much togetherness. I'll see you in a few hours or whatever it is. So to me, she's already, again, setting up this groundwork that, mark my words here, she is going to be the victim of everyone with zero accountability. And she might just go, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But whatever that is won't be elaborated on. These are the patterns of behavior. All right, let's continue and carry on. Every time, by the way, she goes to smear campaign a daughter in this subtle way, I'm going to point it out. So I don't care if I'm 30 seconds into the next snippet or not. I want to point it out as we go along, because these are the things also for people who aren't in this experience, who do see these videos, to understand and notice that to you, this might be, oh, she's just relating a story. It isn't. She's relating an experience that she wants you to buy into, and there's a difference. Also, all the, it was this year and it was Ohio and it was Miami or Florida and it was this and it was that. That's to give you other things to pay attention to so you don't pay attention to the smear campaigns. I'm not saying that she is so intelligent and clever, or not, I don't know her, that she's planned this out and gone, I'll communicate it this way. I think it's more a matter of habit in terms of walking through life as a child who probably, likely, like many of us, had to manipulate their environment in order to survive. And then when you become an adult, if you don't learn how to be able to communicate, find safe relationships where you don't need that mechanism anymore, that mechanism turns into a thing of control. And then that manipulation is no longer something to just survive your environment as a helpless, vulnerable child. Now it actually becomes a weapon of destruction. And even I was burnt out from my job. So in other words, she either got fired or she quit. She didn't have a place to live, didn't have the finance maybe to do it, and was now putting the responsibility of herself onto her adult daughters. And look, shit happens. And hopefully our family can be there, or our chosen family can be there for us. I'm not judging the fact that she fell on hard times. I'm judging the fact that she's laying the groundwork and leaving out a lot of information that would thicken out the picture in a much more authentic and honest way. And that's important. If you're going to talk about it, talk about it. And if you're not, don't. Someone's going to go, she doesn't know information. No, she doesn't. Unless she starts to paint a picture that is detrimental to somebody else, she owes honesty. Content creation, when you're talking about personal stories and things like that, it comes with a responsibility. That's my opinion, and that's how I roll. And there's been a handful of times where I'll say there's something around one of my adult offsprings that I'm not going to talk about, and I let you know that because I'm out of, it's not my story to tell or something like that. And I think there's a big difference in that. One is I'm sharing my story, I'm not sharing theirs. And yes, she's sharing her story in this instance. However, she's not sharing her story. She's sharing what she wants you to believe. And maybe that's out of shame, maybe that's out of guilt. I don't know what that's out of yet. We'll come to find out. Okay.
My plan was to job hunt. In fact, I considered that my job. My job was to job hunt. And I did find a job rather quickly, within 2 weeks. Now, this job was had very long hours. I'm talking, I was gone away from the home for 15 to 16 hours a day. I was leaving in the dark and getting back in the dark. And when I would get back to my middle daughter's home, my young granddaughter would typically be in the bathtub, and I would go straight into the bathroom and spend time playing with her, and then I would help tuck her into bed for the night. And after that, I would get myself something to eat. I would shower and I would go to bed myself just to start over the very next day. I was pretty stressed out in addition to, an entirely new lifestyle change, moving across the country in a new job and leaving the toxic relationship that I was in. My ex had decided to sue me. And when she found out that I sold my home, I was in the contract phase of selling it, she managed to put a stop on the sale proceeds. So the money that I had planned on getting from selling my home that I was going to use to start over in Florida was withheld from me. So that just added a whole other level of stress. My middle daughter at the time, she was also pregnant with her second child, and things seemed to be fine in her home. I helped her set up her nursery. I took care of her daughter while she was in the hospital having the baby. She did stress to me on more than one occasion that she didn't expect me to be a babysitter. She didn't want to feel like she was using me in the same way that she felt her sister, my oldest daughter, was using her mother-in-law to take care of her children. And I thought that was kind of odd, but I just let that go. The job that I had gotten was seasonal. And so unfortunately, right after Christmas, they let me go. And there was one day when my daughter took me aside.
Okay, so she won that lawsuit. However, she left her ex. And I mean, it wouldn't be uncommon that if you had property together and things like that, you can't just sell it. And what does winning the lawsuit mean? She's painting a picture, right? So she was going through that stress, the victim over here. She doesn't have her family of origin, the victim over here. Her middle daughter, who she's living with, is difficult to deal with. She's the victim over here. And in all that being said, she's a wonderful grandmother. The first thing she wants to do is spend time with her granddaughter. And then she has the middle daughter smear campaigning the other daughter of, I don't want to be a user. That's what I'm hearing. I don't want to rely on you in this way because of that. When the reality might have been that the daughter's like, no, you're not going to have unfettered access unsupervised with my daughter because you're problematic. I don't know. Just, if I was a guessing girl, there's something else in there. And she alludes to that a little bit, like, I thought it was odd. And I'm really wondering what the entire backstory is in there, but we're going to get the bits and pieces of irrelevant stuff, obviously, and maybe some relevant. There is some relevant. Her job was seasonal, and unfortunately they let her go. No, it was seasonal, and you knew it had a shelf life. So there is that. I'll give her some just normal, we don't get awards for going to work and making a living and picking ourselves up, right? Like that's not an award for meeting our responsibilities. However, that being said, from what she's saying, it sounds like she didn't just get there and become this gigantic sponge of take responsibility for me. At least that's not what I'm seeing so far. So like I point out the things I find to be red flaggy or cautionary, I'm also going to point out the thing of, okay, it sounds to me like at least as someone who could hold a job and do things and even be a property owner and things like that, she looks like she might have some stuff together there. So, let's point out that she has some level of responsibility, like she can adult.
took me aside and told me how she supported me. She wanted to let me know how she supported me, and she understood all the stress I was undergoing with this move and everything, and which I thought was really nice because my family aren't really that kind of talkers, so I thought that was really nice. Never during those 3 months with my middle daughter did I suspect any type of issues. And so then it did come time for me to move over to my oldest daughter's home. And that went well. I was again job searching because I had been let go from my seasonal job. And again, I found a job, a couple jobs really, rather quickly. And things seem to be going pretty well. My oldest daughter is a lot more easygoing than my middle daughter, and I felt very comfortable with her. I was no longer gone 15 hours a day. So because of that, I did have more time to spend at her home with her and her family, and I helped quite a bit with her children when her and her husband couldn't. Like picking them up from daycare and school and stuff like that. So fast forward to about the spring of 2000.
I find it so interesting the way that she points that out. I mean, you're another functional adult living in a household with your family, with your grandchildren. Why do you need to highlight how you chip in? Or, I would go immediately in and play with the one grandchild in the bath and put them to bed. I would chip in here and there. And maybe she's going somewhere with this picture. It's a little bit, again, it goes back to that thing of, look, I'm a good person. I'm a good person, and they're not. They're the ones with the problem. I didn't do anything wrong, and that's why I don't know why they don't talk to me, kind of thing. And I have a family that I work with, and so there's several offspring. I'm not going to go into detail and gender and things like that. And there's a mother who definitely has lots of markers of emotional immaturity that the problems are really starting to come into focus, and we're going to work on making sure that it doesn't implode and explode, kind of thing. And one of the offspring said to me the other day, what I really don't understand is, why is it my mother will compare her friends and how her friends have these close relationships with their offspring, and how their offspring will take them to dinner and take them to lunch and want to shop with them and do all of these things. And my mother will compare that, but she'll never ask the question, what's different about that relationship and that mom, and how maybe pleasant it is to spend time with that mom that isn't in existence with her. And it was also the way that she worded it, and that's the emotional immaturity. You want what somebody else has, and you also, don't want to look at why they have what they have. And this mother, I'm of the opinion that she can get there if she can get out of her own way. She may or she may not. It reminds me of Jana, of in the way of, I do all of these functional things. I want you to know that I work, I get jobs, I take responsibility for myself, I pitch in with the kids. You're another functional adult in a household, and if you weren't chipping in to be a member of that household, well, that would be shame on you. That would never be appropriate or okay. Like, that would just be bizarre, that if you're just hanging out and one of your grandkids needs a ride, that you wouldn't chip into that. It's not an extraordinary measure. It's basic needs. It's basic care. It's basic participation. And this is where, a lot of these types of parents go sideways, because they think doing that, makes them the good person, the good mom, the good grandmother. And so everything else doesn't count. And that's why I wanted to point it out.
2016, I was still living with my oldest daughter. And my youngest daughter, who was still back in Ohio, she decided to also move to Florida. And I was just thrilled. I was thrilled to death. I would have all three of my girls in Florida, and I thought it would be just great. And, my family is not a close one, so I actually thought this move would bring us all closer. And like me, my youngest daughter also had to temporarily stay with her sisters until she could secure a job. And she had some consideration over which sister she would stay with. And she ultimately chose to stay with her oldest sister, my oldest. And the reasons for that mainly was because my oldest had a bigger home and as such had more room in her home. Now, the pivotal day. So the day my youngest got to Florida, I was over at my middle daughter's home, and my youngest daughter decided to come over there because we would all be there, and we were waiting for my middle daughter to return home from work. And when she got home, she had this obvious coldness about her. It was really strange. I was really confused. I was like, what the heck? Like, I really didn't know what was going on. And she was mad. She was mad at both me and her younger sister. Come to find out later through subsequent conversations with her and my youngest, my middle daughter seemed to have a lot of jealousy going on. And she had made a comment about how I was posting more photos of her older sister's children on social media than her kids. She made a comment about how I was closer to the youngest daughter than with her. And to me, it just seemed like, well, the youngest lived near me in Ohio, so of course we would see each other more often, right? Maybe she was mad.
So was that the middle daughter or the youngest? The middle, I think, right? The difficult one, right? So she's already painted a picture that she's difficult. And she's painted a picture that the eldest is easier for her, right? And so what happens in these family dynamics where there's triangulation? The daughter, in this case, we'll just do daughters because they're daughters. You like that daughter better. You like that daughter's children better because that daughter may or may not be your golden, which means that she's going to bring in goldens. And the middle one, who might have been the overlooked one, the non-existent one, although it seems like she doesn't like her, that's my gut, isn't going to receive that same level of treatment. And so, when we go, she's jealous, it really is invalidating her experience. It's not just about, oh, she's jealous, somebody got a sucker and she didn't get one. She's feeling some kind of way that's hurting her emotionally in that she still can't get from her mother what that one has always gotten, kind of thing. This has a background and a history to it. And as parents, sure, we might get along with one child over the other. We might have more in common with one child over the other. I think temperamentally, we might connect with one over the other, that sort of thing. And that should be our inside stuff going on. On the outside, none of our children should know or be able to pick up on that. And they might have feelings around it from time to time. And there's good reasons for it from time to time. Like, for example, in the dynamic with my two daughters and my son. So my daughters are the bookends, my son's in the middle. My eldest daughter, I had her when I was 17. I didn't go to therapy until she was like 11 years old. My son, I had in my early 20s. My youngest daughter, I had in my mid 20s. I'm a different person throughout all of that. I'm a different level of development, maturity, and also think about finance. A lot of times when you have the youngest come along, the older ones are leaving, you have more money, you have more resources, you have more time. And so that can also look like a favoritism when it's really because of what's going on in life at the time. And the way that you hopefully circumvent that is that the love is really equal, the time is really equal, and you're equitable, and you're aware that you don't do for one if you don't do for the other. It doesn't mean even Steven. However, it does mean certain things should be pretty even Steven. So for example, my ex and I, everybody had the same college funds. and how they use those funds might have been a little bit different because of scholarships and things like that. Everybody got the same thing because we're going to make sure that we are loving all of our children. Not that money is love, but provision is love in the same way. Even if we get along with this one better, we're not giving more to this one. In the family dynamics where there's triangulation, you do things differently. You are highlighting the differences. You are bringing things into the room. She's such a good study on the client that I was talking about earlier that I have now, because the parents rely on the oldest as like that one knows everything. And it's kind of like, what was the thing? What would Jay do? I'm not bringing religion into this on purpose, but remember the bracelets and the whole thing? My clients actually sometimes will say, you're in my head. I think, what would Marnie say? What would so-and-so do? And they've created this really damaging dynamic because they made this oldest child into the parent of the other children as well. And when I say they, it was really the mother. The father is that typical thing that you see in the dynamic where he's gone a lot, he works a lot, he's providing, he travels a lot. And so he's really also gotten to know his children through the lens of the mother. Like, she really has the power. She is the sun that everybody is orbiting around. And now, they're kind of falling off, and it's creating some, I wouldn't say chaos. I would say the beginnings of what could be chaos. And so I'm watching her in the way that she's doing this, and the way she says her daughter is jealous. It feels like she's saying it in a way like she's just a petulant child who's high maintenance and difficult because of the groundwork that she already laid. And the fact of the matter is, if somebody is feeling feelings of being left out or jealous or whatever word we want to use, let's not overlook the fact that what they're really saying is, my feelings are hurt because I'm not being treated in a way that makes me feel as special as you are with my older sister, and it hurts. She's not going to acknowledge it that way. And if she does, well, I'll eat my words and be shocked. And if she does, I guarantee you she'll circle back around and take it back. So even if she does, she's going to take it back because she doesn't relate to it. She doesn't see flaws within herself. She sees a victim within herself, right? And anyway, okay. Oh, okay. We're a quarter of the way. Not too bad.
Often, right? Maybe she was mad that her younger sister decided to stay at her older sister's home instead of her home. I don't know. I'm just speculating, and I still really don't know why, because I've never gotten any of my questions answered. And that was just the beginning of several months of ridiculous shit. I remember her calling me one day and just screaming at me, and I don't remember the reason why. And after that, there were several in-person visits and phone calls where we attempted to discuss whatever the issue was. And I never got any answer. The closest she ever came to explaining why she was so angry is
that was just the beginning of several months of ridiculous shit. So your daughter's feelings are hurt. You know that she's jealous and feeling left out. That's ridiculous shit. Okay, there you go. I don't know why I'm estranged.
screaming at me, and I don't remember the reason why. And after that, there were several in-person visits and phone calls where we attempted to discuss whatever the issue was. And I never got any answer. The closest she ever came to explaining why she was so angry is that she told me that I was not meeting her expectations. And then in the same breath, she also said she felt her expectations were too high. So it was really confusing to me.
Did she feel her expectations were too high because she was high maintenance? Or did she feel that her expectations were too high because she knew that you're a limited person who didn't have the capacity to come forward and help heal the relationship? Words matter. Oh, words matter.
My only goal throughout this time was to really listen to her, to really try to understand, to try to change myself, to rectify whatever behavior of mine that she wasn't liking, to make her happy. One time she did say that she wasn't happy about the fact that I didn't just drop in more. And that's very much out of my comfort zone to drop in on anybody, unannounced, anybody, family or otherwise. But I really wanted to try on my end. So one day I did just that. I dropped in and she did not happen to be home. Her husband was home and with the baby. And so I visited with them for a little bit and then I left. Well, later on, she got really, really angry about that. And it was like, how dare you come visit when you know I'm not home? Well, she's a teacher, elementary school teacher, and it was after school, and I fully did expect her to be home. She had happened to have a birthday party or something to take her daughter to after school. I didn't know that. To me, it wasn't any big deal, but apparently it was to her. There was never any respectful conversation with her. I would try to be respectful and listen, but I would not get that in return. There never has been in my family, not with my mom, not with my brothers, not anybody in my family, not even with all the silent ones who just choose to judge me based on what they hear. So with this middle daughter.
So you come from a background where there's never been any respectful conversation. Let's define respect. What does that mean to you? Because while we know what the word respect means, we also know how it gets weaponized by a lot of parents out there, right? A lot of people out there, for that matter. Why aren't you telling us why it was your own daughter was uncomfortable with you being in her home without her there, alone with her husband? Like, there's got to be more to that story. That doesn't make sense. That math doesn't math. You know, I mean, my eldest daughter is divorced. Back in the day when they were married, if I happened to be there with her husband, I'm sure it wouldn't have been a problem. If my mother had visited my house and been alone with my husband, there would have been a problem. There would have been snarky little things said. There would have been a smear campaign. There would have been criticism. There would have been all sorts of things would have occurred without my being there, and it would have happened by design. If it's a healthy family dynamic, it wouldn't matter. When it's not a healthy family dynamic and it's not a healthy person, that's when it matters. So it's not the drop-in. It's not that her daughter wasn't there, in my opinion. It's that there was something that happened during this period of time that the daughter had an issue with, that she didn't like. Half stories, actually not even half of a story. And I have lots of opinions already about just Jana. People have made comments, I would like you to cover her. She seems so sweet, so nice, so everything. I hope you see this video because I find her to be telling a story just to feel good about herself and not really telling what actually happened. And I don't even get the point of it other than to get attention and sympathy from people online. Like, I don't see an act of service happening here. So, you know, or entertainment. Like I'm trying to figure out what's the point. What is her point?
So with this middle daughter, she was exhibiting what I've come to call her Jekyll and Hyde behavior. There was one instance, for example, where she had asked me to babysit so her and her husband could go out on a date night. And I was excited and thrilled because she had never done that before because, like I said, she had mentioned how she didn't want me to be here to babysit, but I was excited. And a few days before, we were talking and planning the final details, times and such for me to babysit. She suddenly blurts out, "Forget it. I'll get somebody who cares." And that was the end of that. And I was not allowed to babysit.
Come on. Really? Does she really think that she is so clever that, I mean, even anyone who likes her, wouldn't you think, please tell me in the comment section, wouldn't you think, but what was said? What was the issue? Why did your middle daughter, your scapegoat, we can see who the scapegoat is, right? Right? You can see it. Why would it become difficult? Ring, 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 ring. Oh, I'll do it this way. Oh, hi, Mom. That makes me cringe because I don't have one. But anyway, can you come at 4 o'clock to babysit? Yeah, hubby and I are going to go out. And okay, great. Oh, you can't make it till 4:15? Okay, no problem. We can figure it out. Ring, 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 ring. Oh, what do you mean you can't make it at 4:15? Well, we have reservations. Like, if you can't babysit, just let me know. Let me get someone else. No, I could do it. It just might be 4:20. Like, that's what I'm going for with this. Something happened. And this is that thing that they do where they don't tell exactly what actually happened. They just make it seem like this person is completely Jekyll and Hyde, unreasonable, and nobody lit the match. Come on. Ugh.
Another example, there was a dance recital for my two granddaughters, her daughter and my oldest daughter's daughter. And I had a girlfriend at that time, and even though my middle daughter and I weren't really speaking much, I introduced my girlfriend to her. And she just was surprisingly super happy, super friendly. I'm so glad to meet you. I've heard all about you. And I thought, oh, maybe she's over whatever that anger that she's had all these months. So when it was time to leave, everybody was hugging goodbye and stuff. And I went to hug her, and she abruptly pushes me away like real nasty in front of a bunch of people. And it was so humiliating. And I cried the entire way back home. I think the final straw for me was the day I went over to her house. I needed to collect some mail that I had left there and such. And while I was there, we were finalizing the details of Grandparents' Day at the elementary school where she taught as a teacher and my granddaughter attended as a student. I was going to go to Grandparents' Day. I believe it was that Friday, and I was super excited about going, and my granddaughter was super excited, and we got all the details finalized. And at one point, my daughter asked me if I could stay for dinner, and I had to decline because I had to go to work. And I was getting ready to leave, but before I left, she said, "Can I talk to you before you leave?" And I said, "Sure." So we walked around the corner to a adjoining room, that's wide open, probably only 10 feet away from her kitchen bar where my young granddaughter sat. And my daughter very angrily said something to me to the effect about, "Why didn't you come visit me in the hospital?" Well, she had been in the hospital for a kidney stone or something. And I didn't know she was in the hospital and only found out when her husband made a Facebook post about it. So I tried to explain that I didn't know she was in the hospital, and she just started screaming. It was crazy. It was from friendly, inviting me for dinner and finalizing plans, to screaming at me. And I was in such shock. And I walked out of the room over to my granddaughter. I didn't know what to do. I gave her a hug and kiss, and told her I loved her and said, I'll see you Friday for Grandparents' Day. And my daughter came storming after me and she said, if you dare show up, I'll call security on you. And I can't even explain to you how that made me feel. I could not get out of there fast enough. I was shaking.
It haunts me how this must have made my granddaughter feel. Has anybody noticed that so far in the video, and we're about, I don't have my glasses on, we're about halfway through, that she has continuously trash talked her middle daughter and said and shared all the things, all the unreasonable behaviors, all the stuff that her middle daughter did to her. And she has not once made mention of what it is that she did to her daughter. So she's perfect. She did nothing wrong. Her middle daughter is just unreasonable and has expectations that are too high by her own admission. Tell me why you're estranged without telling me why you're estranged. If you're going to tell a story and you have no part to play in it, that's why you're estranged. It's an accountability issue. That maths for me. Wow.
I was shaking. I was in shock. I walked as quickly as I could out to my car. And do you know, my daughter literally chased me screaming out to my car. And I can't remember all the stuff that she was saying. She did make one comment that I remember, something about, well, your ex has moved on. Why haven't you? And I thought later, well, that's really weird. How would she know if my ex has moved on, or what brought that up? That was weird. And up until this point, I had always been very respectful and tried to reason with her, but I lost my cool and I blurted out something about, you should talk in lieu of what your husband did, referring to something naughty that he did early in their relationship. And I had to roll up my window because she was really...
Is there any reason that she had to share that and humiliate her middle daughter who might see this video? She is so, I'm she's Barbara-esque. Remember Solo in the Woods? I'll put the link in this video. Like, I almost feel like it would be interesting to watch them back to back, right? Because the patterns of communication are the patterns of, you can't make it up. They're both that, hiding in plain sight, little old lady thing. And I mean, I'm 60, so she's not much older than I am. And I think Barbara's like 70 or 71. So, we're close enough in age, right? Like, oh, woe is me. I tried not to cry. That would be Barbara. I cried all the way home. That would be her. Like, everything is about her and her emotions and, her daughter being aggressive and things like that. There's no cover being put over her middle daughter. I haven't heard her say anything positive, unless I missed it because of all this noise, about any of her daughters. There's no pride, there's no warmth, there's nothing like that. And now she's just outed to anyone who can watch this video. I can't see how many views. There's 1,400 comments. So that tells me there's a ton of views. I've got to look. I have to see. So 63,000 strangers, and maybe not all strangers, have seen this video where she's just outed something that happened between her daughter and son-in-law. And she doesn't know why she's estranged, thinks nothing about communicating that. Come on. No.
She was really coming after me. I've never seen that kind of behavior like that in her or any of my daughters. So I drove back to my oldest daughter's house where I was living, and I sobbed the whole way. I don't even know how I got back there. I was just crying so hard. Sometime after that, I wrote her a letter, an email, and I don't remember what the email says. I think I probably still have it, and I won't look at it. Not until I'm in a better place because it triggers so much, but I do remember.
I'm not going to share with you the entirety of the email. I'm not going to let you see maybe the aggressive side of me. I'm not going to let you see what I bring up in that email, directly addressing things that I'm not going to share with you. And I can guarantee you, if there was an email coming back from that, from the daughter, we're not going to see that either. The omission is insane.
At the end saying something about, what is she teaching her children, and I'll respect her wishes and stay away if I don't hear from her. And I never did hear from her. I do know that she received that letter because my youngest daughter told me that she received it. Oh, one more thing I thought about, after the estrangement was final, I was having a party in the place where I was staying at the time. This was, I'm not sure when, later on. And she had allowed my oldest daughter to bring her daughter, my granddaughter, to the party with the stipulation that I don't include her in any of the photos that I took, which is really weird because how do you take a group photo of all the family, everybody except one little girl, and say, honey, you can't be in this picture, or blur her face out so she sees it at some time in the future with just her face blurred out? I mean, that was crazy to me. So that's a long story, and I think now's a good time to move on to the estrangement that happened next, and that was with my oldest daughter.
Was it that she didn't want her daughter included in the pictures, or she didn't want Jana to use those pictures on social media? Was there an issue with those boundaries there? Was her middle daughter the kind of mom who didn't want her child on social media at all, or maybe just on other people's platforms and things like that? There's more to that. All right, let's see. Let's see how she villainizes the next daughter and which daughter it is. I have no idea.
Give me a moment to take a deep breath because this is a really hard video for me to make. I'm shaking. Okay, so the oldest daughter was living at her home, and during the time of the estrangement with my middle daughter, and we had many conversations, me, my oldest daughter, her husband, and my youngest daughter. We had many conversations sitting around the table about my middle daughter's behavior and how confusing that was to all of us. But there were no issues staying with my oldest daughter. I felt comfortable there. I helped her as much as I could with the kids in the house. I was still stressed out. My money was still being withheld from me, so I didn't really feel like I could move on. And it had really only been a few months since I moved across the country, and it takes a while to adjust to something like that. I mean, everything was different in my life. I no longer had my own home. The job I had in Ohio, I was self-employed, and now I was working for a boss and still trying to heal from that toxic relationship and all that kind of stuff. In April of that year, 2016, the company that had let me go, due to it being a seasonal job, asked me to come back permanently. And I did accept that, and I went back. The only thing now was that I went back and it was a night shift. A couple months after that, I was able to get my own apartment. And actually, my youngest daughter moved in with me. We shared the apartment. And let's see, fall of 2016, I met my now wife. And about a little over a year later, in the fall of 2017, we got married. And when my lease was up on the apartment, we moved together to a place an hour away. And the reason for that, for moving an hour away from where my girls were and my apartment was because we were both working at the time. And my wife had lived like 2 hours south, so we had to pick like a middle ground between where my apartment was and where her home was, because we still both had to commute to our jobs. So because of that, I wasn't able to see any of my girls nearly as much as before, especially working night shift and when they worked day shift. So it was really hard to get together. Then one day, my oldest daughter sent me a message on Facebook Messenger, and she was mad at me because I don't even know how to explain it. I wasn't doing what she wanted me to do in regard to her daughter's birthday. I was on my way to work, the night shift, and I knew my granddaughter was in school, so I asked my daughter to tell her happy birthday for me, and I would talk to her later. And that really angered her because she wanted me to tell her in person, and it wasn't possible. And then when I inquired as to when I could, she got even more angry at me, insinuating that I know damn well when she's home. And I didn't, but
Well, of course she did. You lived there. You know their patterns. You know their schedule. Come on. She lived there a long time. Of course she knew at least, or she could ask, she could take an interest. It's interesting. So the other one, they had a fight over the babysitting. This one, they had a fight over the birthday and the birthday wishes and things like that. What I'm drawing from that is there is an issue with consistency and reliability, and maybe these little children, these grandchildren that she cares about the feelings so much of, she's mind fucking them by not being consistent and present and reliable and showing up and all the things. That's my read on this. And it's just so unreasonable when anybody else has a problem with her behavior, but it's not unreasonable when she has a problem with their behavior.
Didn't, but she wasn't going to listen. I think something clicked in me because it had gone on months and months and months with my middle daughter, of all the disrespect while I was trying to sit back and please her and do what she wanted. And
the disrespect of them telling me I'm unhappy when you do this, that, or the other, there's the disrespect. Now we know that's how she defines it. That's it in a nutshell. If they push back at her, she's going to cry. She's going to be, oh my gosh, I didn't know, and then continue to do what she does. She's going to defend, deflect, obviously. And so here we are, this second daughter is about to bite the dust with her. But, she's not the problem.
What she wanted and go out of my comfort zone. And I'm like, and this daughter got all disrespectful, and I tried to talk to her decently about it, and she continued her disrespect. I'm like, you know what? That's it. I'm not dealing with this. And I just left the conversation. And that, I believe, is the last time I spoke to her. Later on, I had learned that my wife, unbeknownst to me, had messaged my oldest daughter asking her about what the heck was going on. And my daughter told her that she was sick and tired of me always feeling sorry for myself, which I felt was really weird. And that'll be another topic I'll talk about in a future video. But that didn't even have anything to do with her getting angry at me over the birthday stuff. I think the birthday thing was just an excuse for her anger over something deeper. With both her and my middle daughter, their anger just came totally unexpected and out of the blue. And with my younger daughter,
I love reading between the lines. So in other words, we're tired of trying to placate you and take care of your emotional needs and well-being. And we're looking to you to show up as a parent and a grandparent and own that role. That's it. The tells are, I cried all the way home. Why do we need to know that? It's all about her emotions are soft and sad, and her daughter's emotions are angry and aggressive. These are the things to pay attention to, because that is what a smear campaign actually looks like. I mean, it looks like other things as well. I mean, my mother loved to tell people that Marnie ran away from home at 13, and who knows how she survived, that sort of thing. So it looks like other things as well. When you're dealing with these types of estranged parents, though, what they lead with is how much their offspring hurt and harmed them, and how angry they are and disrespectful, and they just don't understand it. I can guarantee, just based on the patterns of behavior that I see over and over and over and over and over and over again, I can guarantee you that these little girls growing up underneath her were very much responsible for her emotional well-being. And that if they stepped out of line, she was the kind of mother that would be like, you don't love me, and doing that manipulation. And these girls likely worked overtime to make sure that their mother knew that she was loved while they were working to be loved.
With both her and my middle daughter, their anger just came totally unexpected and out of the blue. And with my younger daughter, it happened more gradually. The estrangement with my youngest daughter is very recent, just actually a few months ago. But it really started back in 2016 when my middle daughter, like I said earlier in this video, she was angry at both me and her younger sister. But there was a day where all of a sudden my middle daughter seemingly forgave my younger daughter, and my younger daughter was back in the fold again while I was still out. So one day, as I was driving to work, night shift I was on at the time, I was on the phone with my youngest daughter, and I questioned her about, well, what did you say to your sister, or what happened to cause her to be happy with you again? I mean, I really wanted to know, because
so I minded their business, got in the middle of their business, and opened a can of worms that was none of my business. I really wanted to know. I also, somehow they got back into the fold. Somehow they got back together. Yeah, it's called conflict resolution. It's called listening to each other. It's called respect, actual respect. It's called meeting each other's needs. And listen, I'm sure these relationships are complicated because I'm equally sure that these daughters have been pitted against one another. And this is actually, I would think, Jana's worst nightmare is that her daughters have a united front, because when you're triangulating your children, that's actually what you're working to ensure never happens, so that you always have a teammate of sorts. There is a design behind this. Also, I have to tell you, or I don't have to, I'm going to, as parents, and listen to me very clearly here, of adults, our parenting is no longer the same. We aren't the peacekeepers or the sensitizers between our children. In other words, when your kids are growing up and they're having conflict with one another and they're having little fights and, the things that siblings do, the healthy, normal, healthy rivalries and things like that, it is our responsibility to make sure that our children learn how to see one another and have compassion for one another and take ownership of their own behaviors and have that conflict resolution and build those bonds. It's our job to make sure that, and I think this is most healthy people's position, have that recognition that when we are dead and gone, our children have one another, and wanting that to be the case. And that's the opposite of how these family systems work, right? We want to make sure in a healthy family system that our children grow up as close as they can be, I hope. And so that when they enter into adulthood, as we are no longer parenting, we are still the parent, but the relationship changes. The role isn't the role anymore, kind of thing. And that's from Dr. Lindsay Gibson. I can't even speak anymore. Sorry. No, I'm not sorry. It is what it is. Anyway, I'm not going to edit all this out. We're just going to keep flowing with it. Those relationships are supposed to evolve and change. And part of that evolution is being very clear about not getting in the middle of your adult children. Do not fucking do it. It's not your job anymore. And you let them know. And you do not pick sides. And you just don't do that. Because ultimately, it will fracture your relationship with one of your adult offspring over the other. And it isn't for you to be involved in that and risk that. If you want to have relationships with all your adult offspring in a healthy way, then they should know that you're not taking sides against each other and getting involved in the middle of different things. It doesn't mean that you can't give solicited advice. It does mean that you really do need to have a healthy boundary around that. It's really, really important, especially, like sometimes we have kids that their skin is a little thinner and other ones take things straightforward really easily and all of that sort of thing. And the recognition of somebody might get more bruised by the same behavior that somebody else doesn't. And so as a parent, it's better to stop parenting when they become adults. And it's better to start being more relational and sensitive to who each adult is in the room. And they are adults in the room. My youngest daughter and my eldest daughter, they're sisters. They've had conflict from time to time. They both know I will not get in the middle. They both know it also matters to me, and I care if they're having moments of difficulty or times, where they're just kind of not speaking to each other, not estranged, but for a little period of time or whatever it is. They both know that I am there for them equally, that I love them both, and that I'm not going to take a side from one over to the other. And that allows them each to be able to trust and confide in me without feeling like I'm playing both ends. And for what reason a parent would want to do that? Well, I know the reason, but to me, that's not something I can relate to. And one of the things that I've noticed when the solicited advice has come in is we're not talking about the thing that happened. We're talking about how are we going to communicate around that. And that isn't the same thing as taking sides. And that's something that I think has helped both of my daughters with their relationship with one another that they appreciate. They don't know how I feel, whether this one's right or that one's wrong or that one's right or that one's wrong. I'll never give them that because it isn't appropriate. It isn't valuable. It isn't helpful. Helping people to communicate their feelings better so they can conflict resolve is a much better way to go. And again, if it's not solicited, zip it. Zip it. Okay. She's killing me. She's killing me.
Because I just been racking my brain, what I could do, what I could say to rectify things, and I wasn't getting anywhere. So I was genuinely curious what happened to bring the two of them close together again. And my youngest got angry at me, and here we go, out of the blue, this anger again. And she said that, well, she accused me of not being happy for her that her sister was now accepting her. And that wasn't it at all. I just really wanted to know. And then she angrily said, don't put me in the middle. I'm not going to be placed in the middle. And this anger from her was just so out of the blue. And she was the daughter I was probably closest with, being the youngest. She is 12 and 15 years younger than her older sisters. And did spend a time, many years living with me as a child, more like an only child, because her older siblings were already out of the house. And then, she lived near me in Ohio. Like I said, this wasn't like her at all. And again, I found myself in tears. Like, what's going on? And so I just dropped it. It was just like a taboo subject. She told me, not to put her in the middle, so I didn't. And at the time, she also worked for the same company I did, so I would see her sometimes in the lunchroom. And there was one day in the lunchroom when she was having some big issues, some personal issues, and I said something, and she got really angry and snotty with me in front of a bunch of my coworkers and stormed off. And so there was that anger again that I had never seen. It was just so weird.
I behaved inappropriately, and my daughter called me out on embarrassing her in front of a bunch of people about something that she probably didn't want a bunch of people to know. And she said it, don't put me in the middle. So the daughter, very specifically, the youngest daughter, she doesn't know why. No, you know why. You're asking questions that are none of your business, that are inappropriate. You're not asking her, hey, I noticed that you and, my middle daughter, you guys have worked things out. Can you give me a little bit of insight of maybe what I can do so that I can extend an olive branch? No, she wanted details of what was happening there. And I can, again, guarantee you she was starting to do the attack on the middle daughter. And the younger daughter has gotten wise now and is seeing her mother in a whole different light. She's looking at her mother's relationships with the other daughters and recognizing who the problem is, that the middle daughter maybe wasn't the problem all along, that sort of thing. She does tell on herself. They ultimately do. They ultimately tell on themselves. And there was this anger. No, there was this communication that you just weren't used to receiving. And you know what I've not heard in 30 minutes of this video? I've not heard where she sought therapy for herself. Maybe she'll surprise me, but I kind of doubt it. And I wonder if her daughters have done therapy, and I kind of think they probably have, and whether or not they've asked her to go to therapy, at least individually, to work on her wounds of, her stuff, right? Oh my goodness. Okay.
Things seemed fine on the surface. We never talked about it. And then fast forward to, like when I said my wife and I moved an hour away, there was one day when her and her boyfriend came to visit us. And we're sitting at the table chatting, and she made a comment about how I seemed to be in a bubble, which I thought that was really weird. What does that mean? I'm in a bubble. Does it mean, that I live an hour away and we don't see each other often? I mean, that was something that went both ways. I wasn't getting down there often because I was on the night shift, and she wasn't coming here either. And then also during that same conversation, sitting at my table, something came up about her middle sister, and she started tearing up. And then she blurted out something about how she wasn't allowed to tell me about it. And my anxiety completely hit the ceiling. Okay, something's wrong. Something must be horribly wrong if she's tearing up and she can't tell me something horrible about her sister. So later on, I did some social media snooping and found out that my middle daughter was diagnosed with a serious illness. And apparently she had told people not to tell me about it. So yeah, there's that. So then what happened with my youngest? There was definitely a disconnect. I felt it. We weren't seeing each other much. Neither one of us were texting, very, very occasionally. And there was one.
So the youngest daughter started, and about the illness thing, I don't even, other than to make it seem like she was so worried, but she stayed out of it kind of thing to make herself look like the worried mother. I don't see why she brought that into the room at all. I think that's that thing of, creating that sensitivity for her again. And their relationship started to distance, low contact. And this is always that point where I tell estranged parents or parents who are going through that because they're not estranged yet. Well, in her case, and she's been through it before, so she knows where this could likely end up. Not once, but twice, right? And so now you would think that if you have two daughters who don't want anything to do with you, you would work harder to make sure that you don't lose your last daughter, right? I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about it. I always tell, though, people who are going through this, when you see that your own offspring is distancing, you need to look in the mirror and say, okay, why don't they want to be around me? What is it about my behavior that I need to take a look at to be someone that they actually want to spend time with? What is going on in my dynamic? Get yourself into therapy. Figure that out. And don't attack them with questions. Why? What's going on? What's going on? Because if that had worked in the past, and I say attack them because that's what happens. If you had asked properly in the past and really listened, you likely wouldn't be experiencing that distancing. The fact that you're asking doesn't mean you're listening to the answer, right? There's two parts to this equation here. And so in that low contact, the danger is that the offspring is going, wow, my life's a lot less stressful without you in it. Wow, I'm enjoying a much higher quality of relationships with other people. Wow, every time I interact with you, or most of the time, there's an unpleasantness to this that creates stress that I'm exhausted from, and maybe even another trauma I have to heal. And when I'm distant from you, I don't have that anymore. And so the more time and the more distance and the more it's like, this feels much better. Next thing, it's a full-on estrangement because they've recognized that there isn't value in staying in a relationship with someone who doesn't treat them with value. It doesn't mean that she doesn't have any value for her children. I'm not saying that, actually. It does mean, though, I think the value she has for them is the way that they serve her, not the way that she actually is in a relationship with them. Value's a funny thing, isn't it? Okay. We're almost at the finish line.
One day, where out of the blue, she texted me all friendly and happy. And she said her and her boyfriend purchased a home. And we're so excited. And then she enclosed some pictures and was all excited about that. And I thought, wow, okay. I was shocked because I didn't have any idea that she was buying a home. I didn't even know where she was working at the time, if she was working or anything, because she had quit the job where I was working. I was happy for her, of course, We all want our children to succeed and be happy. And so I congratulated her, and I told her that we would have to come see the house after she got settled. But I never did. And that's my bad, totally. But here's why I didn't. If I'm totally honest.
Before she says why she didn't, I'm going to tell you why. She was jealous. She was jealous. She wasn't happy for her. She wasn't celebrating for her. There's a little girl inside of Jana, little Jana, who went, fuck no, I can't look at that. That hurts me. That triggers me. That's a problem for me. That's a wound for me. Her younger daughter didn't need her anymore now. She's going off into her adult life. There's all sorts of moving pieces in there. And I'll die on the hill if that is a component to what happened, that it was just too hard for her. And I'm not saying she's personality disordered or anything like that. I will say that is an emotional immaturity kind of thing. And a lot of us may even have those feelings. We don't act on them. We act appropriately. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. When you're dealing with someone, though, who maybe is like BPD-ish, it like, okay, I can't make this all about me. And I may not want that, but I also can't look at her having that because I don't have that. There's a whole thing that goes on within there. And if you were raised underneath someone who is more BPD than NPD, you've experienced that thing. And the way that I feel about her is that when somebody else is hurting, it becomes her experience, which is kind of that BPD kind of thing. Again, I'm not saying she has a personality disorder. First of all, I'm not qualified to diagnose. And second of all, I don't know her to be able to even begin on that journey. So I want to make that very clear. I'm just seeing these different behaviors. I talked about in a video the other day where our children, when we have these horrific fractured childhood experiences that were turned into trauma hoods, and we raise our children and they're getting all the things that we never had. We're also probably parenting from the wound to make sure that that happens. While we're really happy for them wholeheartedly, it can also be very triggering to that little girl. I'm speaking for myself, who didn't get to do those things. And as happy as I am, there's a sense of sadness and loss that's right in your face. Like I'm thinking about it, it creates emotions in me. And it can be really triggering. If you're emotionally immature, it will trigger off bad behaviors. If you're emotionally grounded and somewhat emotionally mature or emotionally mature, then what it's going to do is give you the recognition of, okay, I have a wound to take care of that I definitely don't want my offspring to know about, and you behave appropriately and accordingly, and you go out of your way, probably, hopefully, to make sure that they experience every ounce of joy in that experience without even a moment's recognition that you might be suffering behind the scenes. For me, like I didn't go to high school, so I was living on the streets at 13. So from 13 to graduation, I'm watching my kids and we're doing prom dress shopping. And one of my daughters was homecoming queen. Actually, I think she was twice, like all these different things, right? And I was so excited for them. And then I might cry myself to sleep because I didn't have that. And so it triggers. It doesn't mean that your behavior has to follow up on that trigger. With her, though, it does, because she's the most important person in the room and has been the most important person in the room in what is a 48-minute video that we're 3/4 of the way through right now. And she's displaying that over and over and over again. And that's why she's an estranged parent. Because when you're a parent, you cease to be the most important person in the room if you're emotionally mature. Doesn't mean that you don't have needs and that you don't get to prioritize yourself at appropriate points in time. It means that there is a balance to it, though, and that we serve our children first because they are our children, right? We have an obligation and a contract with them when we decide to bring them into the world.
I didn't. If I'm totally honest, I did not feel welcome. I had totally planned on texting her at some point and asking when a good time it would be for us to come. But after that message from her about the house, my wife and I went on 2 vacations. Shortly after, we took a 2-week trip to Costa Rica. And when we returned the next month, we took a very long road trip. Now, my wife and I are very much homebodies, so
we held space for everything except celebrating my youngest daughter's new home.
very much homebodies. So now that we were both retired, these were a big deal to us. And I posted a lot on social media about these trips and photos and videos. And my daughter never commented, liked, or anything. Now, I know she's not on social media a lot, but...
Is she 12 years old? My own daughter. Come on. Does anybody else have a feeling around that? I'm not even going to, well, I just shared my feeling. Do you have a feeling around that? This is a thing I'm starting to see with the emotionally immature parents, or the parents who behave in ways that are emotionally immature. I don't like labeling, if you can't tell. I see it in my practice where my daughters, my son, they posted on social media with their friends. They never take pictures with me. And it's like, oh gosh, okay, we need to work through that. I'm not judging it. It's a wound that's happening. It's a feeling of being slighted and left out. And it's also a marker of a lack of recognition and emotional maturity to go, they're young people living out their lives, and that's what they're supposed to be doing. And my feelings about being wounded about that isn't based on how they do or don't value me. It's just they're living life. And there's a lack of ability to recognize and attach to that, because there's that little child inside who didn't get their needs met, who's looking to their children to meet those needs. And that wound is so destructive and so dangerous if it goes untreated.
A lot, but I do know that she was on enough that she made her own posts occasionally, and she also liked other family members' posts and commented occasionally. So I'm sure she had to know about those trips. And then at the same time, it was my birthday, and she forgot my birthday. And I'm not a big birthday person, but that is just not like her.
Show up for me, even though I didn't show up for you. She had all this space and time to go on these trips, to live her life, do it really out loud. How rejecting was that for her daughter? She has zero recognition around how that must have made her daughter feel, zero curiosity around it. She's justifying her behavior, and in no way is she saying, you know, I look back and I took these trips and it's like, she must have felt like I just didn't care, or that I wasn't celebrating her. Nothing, no empathy for her daughter, no recognition, nada, nothing, zilch. But she doesn't know why she's estranged. Remember the top of the video eons ago? I have no idea. She doesn't want to know. If she did, well, maybe she should rewatch her video. Well, she would have, because we edit and we rewatch it to do. Yeah, I'm a wow. Okay. All right. So I mean, it's just all about, they have unreasonable expectations, and they're not allowed to have feelings of any sort of disappointment in me whatsoever. If they do, they're really angry. That's it in the nutshell. Okay. I keep saying we're going to close it out, but then she says something else.
That is just not like her. So with all those, and to top it off, she never messaged again. It was that one text out of the blue. Look, I bought a house. Be happy for me. And then nothing again. So no, I did not feel welcome. Her obvious distant behavior from me, and her obvious alignment with her sisters, I didn't feel welcome. I'm not trying to make any excuse, but I just didn't feel welcome. Later on, I did apologize for not coming, and I did tell her that I didn't feel welcome. And she
I apologized and I made it her fault. That is not an apology.
Explained that she didn't want me to lump her in with her sisters, that she wanted to be her own person. Fair enough. But because of her words and actions, she wasn't being fair. She was aligning with her sisters, and I'll explain that more in a bit. So now fast forward to Christmas time, I had been seeing some posts come through my social media feed, family photos of all my family getting together for the holidays, all except me, and all smiling and all happy. And my middle daughter would make these posts public. And in my opinion, she did that so I would see them, because she had unfriended me way back when our estrangement happened. So those photos would come through my feed, and I felt like it was being rubbed in, and those posts would trigger me. And then there was a post my middle daughter made on her page, which she also made public, goo-goo gagaing over an elderly aunt of hers who she considered to be her real mom. And so stuff like that really triggered me. And then there was that serious illness that was supposed to be kept a secret from me. And I was having my own similar issues. And just the fact knowing that I didn't have the medical history to let my own doctors know for my own treatment, I just thought was beyond really, really cruel. So as a way to cope, I wrote a Christmas poem. It was a generic poem, not naming any names. I did use terms like brothers and daughters, and I didn't tag anybody. And it was a very emotional poem. I had a lot of tears over it.
So, oh, I had a lot of tears. I hear it coming. So wait a minute. Your middle daughter on purpose is striking out at you, making posts, living her life, because of course it's all about her, right? And you can't, decide to unfollow or stop looking or even block. You could do a temporary, take a break, take a snooze. No, you're not going to do any of that, because how can you get, I bet you, your wife to feel sorry for you if you don't have, content for your wife? I can guarantee you there's a whole other portion of this. But what do you do in the face of all that? And listen, I'm not saying it's not hurtful to know that your whole family and your daughters and you've lost everyone and all of those things are together and you're not there. Even if it's your fault, it's still going to be hurtful. Not that it's her fault, because she doesn't see her part to play at all. Of course that's going to hurt. That's going to suck. So either you keep putting yourself out there to see that, or you decide that your feelings are worth more than that and you have more value in yourself than that, and you need to heal, and you have to stop having access to the matches kind of thing and setting yourself on fire. Because if you're looking, you're setting yourself on fire at that point. We have to make decisions for our own emotional well-being and our mental health that are positive and constructive. And yeah, curiosity sometimes gets the cat and all of that. I get it. However, she don't claim to be the victim of that when you're looking at it. It's not finding its way to you. You can take actions to make sure that you're not being exposed to that. So her response to all of that, though, is to do this, smear campaign them, and now put a poem, because, whatever this isn't good enough. Maybe this video, I guess, is made after the fact. It is to lash out and lash back. And you think that somehow that's going to what? Make things better? Oh, please read the poem.
Over it, and it was just a way for me to cope and express myself where I couldn't express myself otherwise. And I put that on my Facebook page. And then I didn't think much of it for a while. Somehow, despite my middle daughter having unfriended me years ago, saw that poem. Now, family.
Somehow? What do you mean? You could see her stuff. She could see your stuff. Obviously, you made it public too. Somehow, my ass.
Gossip, right? Somebody in my family who I was still friends with at the time, apparently showed that to her, and it triggered her. And she posted her own posts, which she made public.
And it hurt her. Let's stop using the word trigger to cover up hurt. It got to her. If you've been with me for a while, and for those of you who haven't, I say this all the fucking time. These parents know that their offspring know about their content. These parents do this to continue to have control emotionally over their offspring. These parents know that they are causing harm. They are using social media on fucking purpose to do it. I say this over and over and over again, and I will fucking die on this hill a zillion times over. And they're so short-sighted and so fucking stupid. I'm not calling her names. I'm just saying her behavior is stupid. That what they don't understand, because they can't conceptualize they are not as powerful and large and in charge in the room anymore, that what they're actually doing is nailing the coffin shut and setting it on fire, and it's gone forever. Because what ultimately ends up happening, and I've spoken to some of the estranged offspring with certain parents who create content, I wish they'd come on my podcast, but that's a topic for another day. I understand why they don't also. And even if I didn't understand it, I obviously would respect it. Initially, this hurts. It's embarrassing. You know, the thing, the middle daughter, the marriage. It's all the things, right? It's devastating. It's like, why doesn't my own parent love me enough to at least put cover over me? It's all the painful stuff. And it's the revalidation of they don't feel bad for how they make their own daughters and sons, their offspring feel. All of that happens in there. And typically what happens with these types of estranged parents is they escalate in the way that they smear campaign. They don't become calmer processing all this feeling around this. They become bigger and bolder, and a lot of times it ends with cease and desist letters and restraining orders. I see it frequently. It's happening more and more and more because they are being more bold and damaging, and it's going into job threatening and all of these different things. So it necessitates a cease and desist and legal action. It isn't just I'm telling a story, right? It's I'm telling a story that's damaging. Anywho, it hits this height of emotions that are just devastating. And then that adult offspring gets on the other side and goes, I accept the fact now that nothing is going to change over here. If this person who's supposed to love me the most in the world is willing to violate me in this way, this is never going to get better. This is never going to be okay. I'm working for a love and a relationship that never existed and will never exist. And in those moments, the hope finally dies. And another level of healing begins, and they never look back. This serves as a validation that is, I think, a lot of times unanticipated. For me, I get a validation from this because these personality types are very much like my own mother. And there was one creator, I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head. Oh, yes, I can. It's a Charlie Brown girl, that if my mother could get away with saying the things on the outside without worrying about nurturing her own likability, she would sound just like that. And so it gave me a closure I didn't even know I needed, because I'm 35 years out and so far past it. Yet here you go. Another piece just falls into place that lightens that weight that I didn't even know I was still carrying. So they are truly their own worst enemies after being our worst enemies. I don't know if there's comfort in that or not. I don't know that it matters. That is what happens. So.
And tagged a whole ton of family members, even family members who weren't in on the estrangement, all these silent ones. And it was a smear campaign against me. I only read the first sentence enough to know that it was very negative, and as a self-boundary. I chose to not read it, and I never have read it. My youngest daughter, despite claiming to be...
I fucking bet she read every single word, and she wants her daughter to know she didn't. There you go.
To be neutral, decided that this poem was all my fault. And after seeing her comment under that smear campaign post, the only comment that I did read, because she was the only one I was not estranged from at the time, her comment was something about how she's not good at communication herself, or something like that. And that I wonder where I get that from, obviously meaning me. I stupidly figured that, hey, this is the only family member who has the courage to admit that they aren't perfect either. It's not just me that's not perfect, that they're not perfect. And so I mistakenly thought that maybe she would be understanding. I mean, she had always been understanding in the past. So a while later, I'm not sure how long, a month, 2, 3 months, I asked her about it, about her comment. And that was a mistake. Asking her about it is what led to...
So we're barely speaking. I haven't celebrated her new life. I rejected her by showing her I had time for everything else, that she wasn't my priority. And then I decided that that might be a door opener. Let me walk through it to get my clutches back into her, my claws back into her. Talk about overestimating her position.
About it is what led to our final estrangement. And again, there's no talking in my family, no talking from anybody on the other side without rudeness and disrespect. And it was no different this time. After she told me that she had listened to her sister's side and that they had valid point.
She listened to her sister's experiences and perspectives, and it resonated, I bet you. Not just it had valid point, it resonated with her experience as well, and things that she was seeing. And likely all of these daughters have had different types of struggles as a result of having a mother like her, because we all know what happens, right? In different varying degrees, depending on what was happening, like in the relationship, and also what your position was as the daughter to this mother, you know, scapegoat, golden child, maybe a little bit of both, that sort of thing. So at the end of the day, it sounds like, and I hope this is what's going to come to pass, that these 3 daughters walked away having relationships with one another and have apparently become good enough communicators to be able to have other family relationships as well. Imagine that. Because she keeps going back, nobody in my family communicates. Nobody in my family of origin, that group of relatives, communicates over anything that they don't want to hear. I mean, my grandfather's favorite word was baloney. He would use it 10 times in the same sentence just to talk over somebody. I remember watching it as a little girl, you know. And what does that have to do with anything else? We go on, we create our own family, and we decide what we want that to look like. And for a lot of us, what we decide is we want to make sure it doesn't look like anything like that. I didn't grow up with any communication about anything. Feelings, I didn't even, like, if somebody had said to me, and I see this a lot with my clients as well, how did you get your emotional needs met? I'd be like, what are emotional needs? I need them described to me. That's how foreign that was to me, not is anymore. And so some of us go on and go, I came from all this shit. Let's leave that shit in the box over there. Let's flush it away, and let's not bring it forward, and let's figure out how to be communicators. She really passes the buck everywhere outside of herself. And the fact that you don't come from communication doesn't mean you can't develop communication and forge your way in a different way with your own new family that you create. That's a choice. And so she's raised daughters who found their voice, and when they do, they're angry and disrespectful and hides behind, we don't know how to communicate respectfully. It just, she just tells on herself so much. And I'm still kind of like, wow, so many people were like, I like her, I think she's really nice, and this, it's the demeanor, it's the older lady, I was going to say old lady, that's why I did that, older lady factor. It's what you're seeing in front of you now without really looking. Hopefully this video will, well, I mean, you can't unsee it, right? Reading between the lines, and it's not only looking at what is said, it's also looking at what isn't said and how it's said or not said, right? Mm-hmm.
I reminded her that she had asked me not to put her in the middle, and I had respected that. And as such, I never told her my side of the story. And she insisted that I could tell her my side of the story, that it wouldn't be putting her in the middle. But trying to do that only instigated her rudeness and disrespect even more. She said a lot of rude things to me. She said I was being childish, toxic, ridiculous, and that I needed to get over it. Well, you never get over it. She insinuated that because I wrote that poem that I wasn't over it. Well,
Did she mean over it, or did she mean stop behaving in a manner where you're still causing harm and damage, and that you actually should be the adult in the room, and that you are being ridiculous and childish by lashing out in that way? I know who the emotionally mature one was in that conversation for fucking sure.
no, I'm never going to get over it, but I also don't dwell on it and live on it 24/7 or even think about it 24/7. But that's a very dismissive thing to say to somebody. She added things like, since it's the entire family on one side and only me on the other side, that must mean the problem is me.
Okay, I just want to address something. It is a dismissive thing to say. However, she's not really disclosing the context, right? And I think it normally is a dismissive thing. I think in this context, and yeah, well, I'm not really assuming. I'm using her story that she's telling. So based on the story she's telling, what I'm hearing is that the daughter is like, you need to be the adult in the room. You need to be the mom and the parent. And you lashing out like this is showing that you're not in a place of emotional maturity, and I'm obviously using my words, that is helpful to anyone, and you're being problematic. And the thing about being put in the middle, I think there was a difference between her questioning her daughter's relationship with her other daughter. That's placing that daughter in the middle to make her be loyal and all the things that we know happens in these family dynamics, as opposed to your daughter coming to you looking for insight and asking questions, and maybe even genuinely wanting to know what, taking the temperature, what's going on, and maybe even trying to be helpful, and like, you doing this is making things worse. And the part of her daughter saying, if nobody wants to talk to you, maybe you're the problem, there's a little sticky in there. There can be a little sticky in there, right? And I do want to acknowledge that. I think it's important because I know so many of us have that experience. I'm the only one in my family of origin, the relatives on my mother's side of the family, that, well, I'm one of two that has no relationships within that. And it's no like surprise, yeah, or shock, or it's not unpredictable that it's the scapegoats who escaped and everybody else is locked into place in that system. And I mean, my mother is actually a convicted criminal and they still stand with her. Even if she wasn't, however, I've got something even more tangible. And so we all, many times, I think, or most of us, I don't like absolutes, feel like, why couldn't I maintain anyone? Why didn't anyone love me? And so that's a really tender, tender spot. And I could see where and why her daughter would say that. And I won't stand with a statement like that. I don't think that that's a good thing. I don't think that that is necessarily even an accurate thing where it comes to the family of origin. Where it comes to the fact that you have three offspring, and I'm kind of like, it's so unlucky and all the things that they had a mother like this. I'm also like, wow, like what must it be like to be able to walk away with someone who can validate your experience and who you can grow and have family with and love and all of those things. That must be amazing, right? Um, and I don't know what happened in Jana's background with her mother, and she has a brother. So I would imagine she was probably the scapegoat in that unit as well. I don't know. Maybe I'll look into it. Maybe I'll make another video about her. Well, time will tell, right? Because I have a list I'm working through that you guys have given me, and I appreciate it. And by the way, on that note, when you give me an actual link to a video, it makes my life exponentially easier because then I can just go right into that one. So if you have one, even if it looks like YouTube isn't letting it come in, sometimes it goes into the held box, or you can email it to me. Everything's in the description of this video. A daughter that's pointing out to her, you know, you have three daughters who don't want to speak to you. It could be a you problem. That's a whole different ball of wax. And that's, I think, an extremely appropriate statement. Not that I'm the one who should be making that decision. I'm just saying, you know, if all of your children are having difficulty with you, or most of them, then that's really good, strong, concrete evidence. If some of them are, that's still evidence, because at the end of the day, it is a primal relationship. It is a relationship, particularly with a mother, that is born of the strongest of things attached to it. Babies, mothers, they're our first love. We're born unconditionally loving them because there's a built-in trust through the nurturing that happens in utero. And so even if it's just one, we have to look in the mirror and go, okay, where did I fall short? What's going on here? And if we don't, well, you're just disempowering yourself, because what you can't acknowledge, you cannot alter, you cannot resolve. If everything happened because of something outside of yourself, you've just completely rendered yourself 100% powerless. Family dynamics are complex, right? And I also want to give sunlight to that. If you raise a child within a narcissistic family system and they end up no contact with you, it can be related to that system, and you're still a contributor because you stayed in the system, whether you knew better or not, and all the things, because we do lay the foundation for the relationship we have with those children. And there are situations where people end up in estrangement because of the family system, because they didn't realize what was happening behind the scenes and all of that. And it's devastatingly sad when that happens. Well, it's all devastatingly sad, because, we're meant to be in these relationships with our parents and have that love and that support. We're not meant to be adult orphans, grieving, living people, and the trauma that they caused us and the losses that result from those traumas, right? So I wanted to address that because it isn't painted with one brush. That being said, with the estranged parents who are content creators in particular, who don't take accountability, I have yet to see really anybody doing that, who are speaking the way that Jana is speaking, the responsibility I lay at their feet, because they know that they're doing harm. They continue to do harm in the face of their adult offspring saying, you need to stop doing that, and they do it anyway. That's intention. I don't give a shit about anybody else. And that's why you are where you are, period. Well, maybe lots of periods.
She also made a comment about how, because I'm the mother, it's my fault, which is kind of interesting because when your children grow up and become adults, they make up their own mind. And I'm not mom to my brothers and my other family members. So how does being a mom have anything to do with it? I think it's just a stereotypical thing like, oh, if your child has any issues or they're angry with you or they don't want anything to do with you, it must be the parents' fault, right? I'm supposed to be the role model because I'm the mother. Well, yeah, I'm the role model, but once you become an adult, then what? Aren't you the role model for your own self? I'm not your role model anymore. She questioned me if...
She really should have just stopped. So she bears no responsibility. There you have it, folks, in a nutshell. Just because she was a mother at one time, she didn't have any you became the adults all of a sudden, and you made a decision that had no bearing on how I was as a mother. There's no report card in there whatsoever. She really should have just quit while she was almost ahead. She's never going to be ahead. I'm kind of stunned. I'm like actually legitimately stunned by that one. Yep. Stunned. Okay. All right.
Questioned me if I cared about family, which I found extremely interesting because here my whole family is excluding me. So what does that tell you about who cares about family? In addition, most if not all of my family are MAGA, which I find interesting because although MAGA claims they're all about family, they support an administration who is tearing families apart and attempting to take away the rights of families. Then there was weird stuff like she said, well, I don't think you ever did anything really bad, but I witnessed the disappointment on my nephew's face, meaning my oldest daughter's son, when he did not receive the PlayStation as a gift from you winning that. Well, I never won a PlayStation, so I thought that was odd. I did win a Nintendo Switch at some point, and I decided that was something I wanted to keep at my home for when my grandchildren would come visit so they would have something to do. I didn't know I was expected to give that to him as a gift. And besides, his mom had told me they were buying him a new gaming system for Christmas. So I thought that was really weird. The biggest thing was when she told me that, hey, I'm thinking about marrying my boyfriend, but if I do, I wouldn't be able to invite you. And she insinuated that I would be an issue or I would cause issues around her sisters if she invited me. She said it would really suck, but she couldn't invite me. So I'm smiling and laughing, but it's so hypocritical because her sisters are the ones who started the issues in the first place and refused to work them out. With that poem that I wrote, she casted me out as the bad one, never considering the things that the family were doing to me to cause me the need to express my feelings. So in this year, 2025, sporadic messages with my youngest daughter. I found myself, for reading her disrespectful comments and obviously aligning with her sisters, I found myself with a lot of physical stomach pains, a lot of tears, crying in private. I already suffer from anxiety, and my anxiety was a lot higher, and I don't need that, and it's not healthy for me to feel stressed out. And I did attempt to put some boundaries on her and told her that our conversations need to needed to be respectful. I said that a couple times, but those comments were met with silence. One day I just woke up and I said, no more. No more. I'm going to put me first, and there's nothing wrong in putting me first. I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to make excuses for myself. I've made lots of mistakes. I'm willing to be respectful and work things out. But I wasn't going to spend every other day in absolute tears and stomach pains. And I made the difficult decision to block my entire family on social media. Well, I left a few, like distant cousins and such. And then I wrote my youngest daughter a email, which I sent her. And I explained to her that I was going to step back. And I did tell her that she's not teaching any future generations or her future children a better way, which was something that she did say to me, that she was trying to change things up for the future. I wished her well and happiness and health, and told her I'd always be available if she could approach me with respect. And that was several months ago, and that was that. I'm sure all three of my girls have their own versions of events, which is fine. I'm just trying to relate what happened from my personal perspective. There's so much more when it pertains to my daughters, how it makes me feel, how I'm coping, why I think it happened, and how it has changed me. So I hope you're all doing well and having a great day, and I will see you in the next video.
There's so much more, and I'm not perfect. Am I lost? Did she at any point in time take any accountability or talk about like their childhood, what their foundation was like, who they grew up with? Like there's so much missing, right? So much unsaid. And why not read the letters, the emails? So two daughters went no contact with her. And when the third one was trying to, it seems to me, like maintain relationships in the best way that she knew how, that disloyalty caused a discard. It caused a discard. That's what she did. She discarded the last one because she recognized, in my opinion, that she wasn't going to get that blindness from her anymore in her direction. She wasn't going to get that little girl that she spent so much time with. That little girl ceased to exist, because we grow up and we become adults. And that little girl grew up into an adult who started asking questions. And rather than dealing with the questions, she calls them disrespect and anger. And when she recognized that she wasn't going to be able to have what she needed to have, she discarded her. It's just so patterned and predictable, and it never fails to stun me. It doesn't. So for all of you who would like to know in a nutshell what I think about just Jana, I think she's a person who was traumatized in childhood, who turned into an adult who caused trauma. And if she was allowed to have access to her grandchildren, she will continue to do so. She will triangulate. The oldest daughter, she likes those. The middle one, not so much. And her daughters creating this distance ends her ability to carry on the cycle with their own families that they're forming. That's what I think. Woo, that was long and a lot. Anywho, see, I'm going to sparkle away. I'm like snarky sparky in a different way today on the outside. And I'm actually wearing slippers. And I look down at them. I clearly have a theme. Because I'm not going to walk around my flat with shoes on. And I'm just kind of laughing to myself at that. Anywho, I'm off to live my best life. You might notice the background is different. I'm trying to figure out my video format and all the different things. I'm in Florence and beginning yet another chapter of my travels. So I will see you very soon.